Qualities of a good keeper: patience, which I don't have, the ability to work with other people.
It is a wide range of person, from the glamorous, the handsome, right down to, you know, the weird, who just would sit there in an anorak studying one species of thrush for their entire life.
Every day is like an adventure. You never quite know what's going to happen. You can plan it. As soon as you plan it, it's all going to go tits, and you're going to end up having to do God knows what else. But like I say, there's no such thing as an average day.
I'm the curator. My role is to really look after the 300 odd species of animals, 2,000 specimens, 23 keeping staff who are probably more trouble than the animals put together. Routine work here, certainly for keeping staff, is coming in, checking their animals in the morning, making sure there are no problems, cleaning, feeding, what you would expect, but there's not a day goes by without something unusual happening.
Right, shall I leave you to it then, mate?
Quick look at the wolves and then we'll split off again.
Yeah, okay.
I can prove to you that they don't like me.
All right.
My name's Mark. I'm the section head of the West section, which is the farm area, which is here, and also the walk through down to the wolves.
Well, I'll go up to the capybara and make a start there then.
All right. Well,
or the wallabies and
then I'll go and start on the peccary.
You're going to do your mates the peccaries, yeah.
A peccary is, to all intents and purposes, a South American pig. Just slightly primitive, really. In the wild, they live in large groups, up to 100 or so individuals. They have quite a strong pack instinct. If you watch them for any length of time, you'll see them bonding by rubbing head to tail, and they just live in dense undergrowth, basically marauding groups, going around foraging wherever they go, trying to find food and keep going. You can read every book about an animal, but as soon as you think you know something, they'll prove you wrong. Books have general information about all animals, but they don't have each individual animal. And it could be anything from a sheep to the rhinos. They're all individuals at the end of the day. The situation is with our white-lipped peccaries is we didn't really realise how quickly they'd multiply, and they've just blossomed this last year. We've reached from an original of 3 adults to now we have 11 individuals, and we've actually got a complete hands-off policy with them because they're so aggressive and territorial, and it's actually become more and more evident now as the group's increased in size. Their confidence has grown, and the male has become increasingly aggressive and very intolerant of us around the pen.
I'm Reggie Hayworth, and my father, John Hayworth, started the Wildlife Park in 1970. And I call myself managing director, but that sounds rather a grand title. It's mostly chief litter picker, I think, more than most things. God, I don't believe it. Sorry. I have to say, I don't really tie myself up in knots, worrying too much about whether or not I'm a good boss. I'm certainly not going to change myself in order to fit how, the equivalent of 104 full-time employees. There's no way I'm going to be able to please most of them half the time, or, you just can't. So really, you've just got to hope that the way you do things is not totally repugnant to more than a small proportion of them, and hope that the rest of them can more or less put up with the fact that, yes, they've got to have a boss, so it might as well be him. I just think almost by definition, sort of managers, they're much closer to David Brent than they'd care to admit.
Morning.
I'm sure I've got David Brent written all over me. I always wanted to be involved in the wildlife park, and I suppose I always knew that I would be involved. I'm the only son, and so it wasn't rocket science to see the writing on the wall. We never actually sat down and had a conversation about it. It was just it was going to happen.
My earliest memories of coming to the park are probably sneaking in when I could. My parents and that, we don't live that far from the park, so we used to come fairly regularly. And I remember being beaten up by an escaped sheep out front of the gift shop when I was a small boy, fighting over a Jaffa cake, which unfortunately the sheep won. I was a lot smaller in those days. These are our resident Wisant sheep. This is a full-grown sheep. This ain't going to get much bigger than this. And the idea was going to have 3 or 4, all about the same age. So we hand-reared them, and she became rather tame, and she rather attached to me, which is rather embarrassing. I think I get a bit fed up being called Bo Peep all the time, but apart from that, it's fine, really. Stuart! I originally wanted to be a shepherd as a small boy. That's what I really wanted to do. And my dad worked on a farm, and I wanted to work on the farm. That's it, and I'm just lucky I ended up here, I suppose.
My father's always wanted a big mixture of animals. I mean, there was a finite amount that we could afford, so there was nothing very big. And under the original planning consent, I think it was something like small mammals and farm stock could be exhibited here. So the big things were sort of llamas, you could just about get away with because they were sort of hoof stock, vaguely sort of agricultural. And then tapirs. I remember the rhinos arriving, that was quite a big moment. I think they arrived in 1972, and I would imagine it was somewhat in breach of the planning consent, because no one could have pretended they were a small mammal. But you know, once you've got a rhino in your field, and there's a limit really to what you can do about it.
17 years I've looked after him. In his younger days, he was a bit stroppy and argumentative, but he's got older and wiser now. He's just like an old man. And it's just like working with an old man.
Good dog. It's not a complicated business. It really isn't. I mean, you just open the gates, people turn up at a certain time of year, sun's shining, you know, they pay, away you go. And every moment I'm sitting at this desk is a sort of moment wasted. There's not much more important work than being outside and making sure that the visitors are having a nice time. Lynn, I'm going to go for a wander. I probably won't bother with my radio, I don't think. See you later. Okay. And when I was a child, the first job I ever did here was selling guidebooks. And as the cars were parked, and I'd go up to them, and in those days, obviously, I was head height with the top of the door, you know, and I'd hold the guidebook and say, we'd like a guidebook. And they cost, 30p, I think, in those days. I used to make a fortune. I got paid a penny a guidebook I sold in commission.
I was a very shy school leaver, didn't know what I wanted to do. My parents pushed me into getting a job, and we come up here, and I started on the car park. From the car park, I worked on the train, then I did odd jobs through the winter, and then just by chance a position came up and they gave the opportunity to me, and I came as a keeper. We've never had a dog species here before. We went for the Canadian timber wolves because they're well represented as a species, there's plenty of animals around, and it's going to be a learning process for us. The whole idea is while they're here, we learn how to manage them. Just simple things like vaccinations and stuff like that. With the idea being is once we're sorted with the you know, understand it, and the wolves have lived out their life here, we can actually then get a more threatened species and actually have more idea what we can do with them.
I mean, first and foremost, the wildlife park has got to be about providing entertaining day out for families, for people interested in animals. They've got to want to come here because we're charging them for it, you know, they're paying. It's got to be fun. The children have got to sleep in the car on the way home.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the penguin feeding here at Cotswold Wildlife Park. And as you can see, they're all very active in the water this afternoon.
I happen to think that the British public is innately incredibly polite. And if you ask them, are they having a good time, they'll just say yes, you know, anything for a quiet life. You know, they're not going to say, well, actually, no, we're being fleeced, rotten, and the place is a dump. So it's very difficult to work out whether you're actually providing that key thing. And, you know, we're being pushed by the Zoo Licensing Act and by all the anti-zoo brigade to be educational and, you know, do lots of stuff for conservation, you know, which is great, and that's fine, but that's pretty secondary.
Good boy.
I'm very attached to Bull. I mean, you know, he's been here since 1972. I remember him, I can see him now, I can see the nose coming out of the crate, you know, which he'd been in for God knows how many weeks. That's just the most beautiful animal, and I just know it better than any animal I'll ever know, you know, 35 years, and I used to sort of get into the enclosure with it and stroke it, and I once sat on it, went for a little ride on it round the yard early one morning before the keepers had got in. It was just such a sweet animal.
A lot of the animals that the general public consider to be cute and cuddly are pretty nasty. Most of them have got claws and teeth, that's the problem, and the small mammals are particularly aggressive, particularly with things like meerkats. I think most people watch programmes about meerkats on television. I mean, they're horrible things, really. I mean, they've got the most aggressive and possibly unhappy social systems of any species, but people think they're cute and cuddly.
The way people relate to the animals in the park and things like that is a bit of a grey area, I think, because they just want to personalise it, really, and they try and think on their own experiences and try and relate into the animal, and they don't really think or try and work out actually what that animal wants to do or is trying to do, and just thinking what they'd do in that situation. We do get bizarre descriptions from public of what so-and-so animal is and what problems it could be with it. One of the famous ones from the past was we had waterbuck here and a marabou stork, and a member of Republic reported a reindeer beating up a penguin, and it was this, sometimes the descriptions just defy explanations.
In captivity, an animal is basically very spoiled. It can wait for its food all day long and it will get a complete diet. There's no need for predator avoidance or anything like that. So what Enrichment is doing is it's trying to put in some of the natural activity back into a captive life. Again, you know, we've got meerkats here, for instance. They know they're not going to get eaten by anything, but we get buzzards, we get kites. They will react to that, which is a type of enrichment. You know, negative stress is important for a lot of wild animals as positive, because they spend a lot of time running away from things. You know, we're not going to go around chasing things dressed as badgers or anything like that, but what we will do is we'll give them very rough bits of food, you know, scatter them widely around so they have to search for the food. I'm certainly not going to advocate we stick a lion next to the exhibit just to give them a bit of negative stress, but all of these things have to be taken into consideration, you know, for a healthy environment.
Oh, brilliant. Great. Chris, is this the finished product?
This is it indeed,
absolutely
yeah.
Fantastic.
Well done.
Our very own termite mound.
Indeed, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. A little wiggle and a little...
Yeah, okay.
There we go.
So we put the termites in here, or mealworms or whatever in there.
And they gradually wriggle through the holes and then pop out at the different points.
And the meerkats or the mongoose will just hang around at the bottom. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So they never quite know when they're getting their food.
Yeah, quite. Brilliant. God, that's fun. Oh, well done. I think these animals essentially are wild animals, so they're not pets for us to pick up and treat as playthings. And the least that we can do is just try and maintain the illusion that they do have a measure of space and independence that is theirs, and to that extent they are still wild. And with that is synonymous with them keeping their dignity as wild animals.
We had 2 young otters that were born earlier this year, and they're just getting to the sort of age now where they're very active, and if we leave it too much longer they'll be very difficult to catch. And so while they're still just about handleable, we need to be able to catch them, find out what sex they are, and also give them their ID chip so they can be scanned and identified later on. The otters, although they may in their enclosure look very cute and they've got a nice little squeaky voice and that kind of thing, they are hunters, and they've got very sharp teeth and very sharp claws. And in particular the 2 youngsters that we're going to be catching have never been handled before. Where is it, Mark?
In here.
So when we first grab hold of them, they're not going to have a clue what's happening.
Hello, missus.
They're going to react as if they've been caught by another predator, and they're going to bite, they're going to scratch, they're going to scream, they're going to do all they can really to try and get away. Come in here out of the way. Do you want to put it in the net, Mark, to help restrain it? A lot of the time, certainly from my experience, if you do have to chase an animal to catch it, obviously it can be seen as a negative thing because you're chasing an animal. But in captivity, they would hardly ever get chased, and it is actually good experience for them. They do get something out of it, and it kind of gets the adrenaline pumping and gets a bit of the wild back into them, really. This is the fun bit now.
Yeah. Oh, actually,
There's Amy. Amy? Amy, do you want to come in and keep the male back? Wait, out the way. Right, that's both of them. No, it's all right. We'll get this one done. That's it, perfect. Yep, yeah. That's all confirmed. Yeah. So this first one is a male, and he's none the worse for his wear after all his screaming. His parents aren't too happy with us being here, so you can come out now. Come on then, here we go.
the otters got me through the glove, and as a result, it's not the worst I've had, but it's still painful. Trials and tribulations of a zookeeper.
Someone is escaping.
Looks like we've got an otter out now. It's jumped over the wall while we were doing that, so... Okay. Which one is it, do you know?
I think it's one of the youngsters from last.
One of the youngsters from last year, yeah. Obviously the wall for the enclosure is quite low, and every day they're used to it and they're happy where they are. They don't want to get out, but as soon as anything happens that's slightly tense or gives them a burst of energy, they jump over.
They're incredible climbers, so they could be kind of anywhere now.
Unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do until we actually spot it, so it's just a case of searching. There's so many hiding places for an otter around here, it's going to be difficult. I think really, because of the size of the park here, we could go around bashing bushes and trying to find it all day, but I think just leave it to calm down for a bit. And I'm sure we'll get a sighting of it then. But it's just a case of waiting for somebody to let us know that they've seen it. I'm sure it will try and come back, because they're a family group and it wouldn't just run away. There is a balance that you need to keep between when you're looking after animals in zoos, because they're not pets, they are wild animals, and you need to have them exhibit wild behaviour for us to observe, for the public to observe, and for them to be able to reproduce and do as they would in the wild. But there is also a small part of it where you do need to manage them, and so it is handy if you can hand feed an animal to give it medication, for example, or even so you can give it a good visual examination to make sure that it's healthy and everything's okay with it.
I'm just going to go up to the wolves and throw some chicks in for them. So we're trying to get them used to coming and taking these chicks so we can put sedatives in, and then the vet can hopefully come in and administer the vaccines. When we first got them, they were absolutely terrified of keepers, and whenever we appeared, they would run away and we couldn't get them to come anywhere near us. Come on, you guys, don't be silly. To start with, they wouldn't come anywhere near the food when I was still around. They would just, they'd only come and take it after I'd gone. So only in the last sort of month and a half, they've started actually coming and taking the meat as I'm there. There you go. Good girl. Come on, Carly. Obviously, that's really important because when we're going to be medicating them, I need to see who's taken the medicine. Good girl. Good girl. Carly. No, that wasn't for you. You're getting braver. It's all right, guys. Don't panic. Don't panic. Yeah, the other two got, one of them got 2 and the other one got 1. It's pretty good. I wasn't expecting them to come over at all, so I'm really pleased with that.
I think anybody who sort of gets depressed about human nature ought to come and work here. I mean, statistically, if we have 250,000 visitors a year, we're going to have 3,300 of the most barking 1% in the country. And that's like 10 a day, every day of the year, sort of wandering around the place doing God knows what. But if they do come here, all I can say is they're on best behaviour. What's surprising is how often you, in this place, you think, well, let's create this really beautiful thing, and let's not have lots of barriers around it because it's got so many people walking past it. If it's beautiful, they'll trash it. Let's just see what happens if we have really low fences around the penguins and around the meerkats. Why shouldn't they just appreciate that they're being trusted? It gives them a sense of sort of ownership of why they're here. You know, they're being trusted with this thing. And the sort of thing that really hit me the other day, I was in the car park and this bloke was walking ahead of me. Absolutely the sort of bloke that looked pretty scary, frankly. You know, shaven-headed and sort of mad tattoos absolutely everywhere. And I was happened to be walking along behind him. And I saw this really quite big bit of litter just in front of him. And I was about to walk past him and he bent down and picked it up and stuck it in the bin. And I said, oh God, you don't have to do that. And he said, I can't believe it, you know, it's a beautiful place here. I can't bear it when people drop litter in a place like this. Absolutely, you know, I can't walk past that and not pick it up and put it in the bin. And it was, I practically cried. It was just so fantastic. If you have high expectations of people, if you do trust them, and if you expect them to, you know, not to drop litter and all the rest of it, I'd like to think that, you know, this place does bring that out in people.
1, 2, 3.
It's not complicated, it's nature.
4, 5, 6, yeah. It's just going back into the hole now.